In his new memoir, Black and White, Stephen Dorsey gives his perspective on racism in Canada based on his feeling that he was, quote, a white kid growing up in a black body. Stephen joins us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Your book pulls a lot of punches. Very emotionally charged, and I really like the passion in this book. Tell us about an incident that was sparked by a sign at your local hardware store.
Well, first, happy Black History Month.
Yes.
Really, like everybody, the global reckoning on race that happened following the murder of George Floyd affected me, and really jumped into the discourse that was going on. And it just so happened that there was a local incident where a local business person put a marquee up, said "All Lives Matter," which, for those of us who know, is really a term that was appropriated by white supremacists to push back against the Black Lives Matter movement. So that started a lot of noise online, on social media. And instead of just chiming in, I actually went and talked to the gentleman, and we had a conversation which led me to write an article and so on, and led me to eventually a bigger discussion and writing a book.
Because you grew up in a racist household.
I know. I put it in the book, and it's really an unconventional story, and I wanted to put my personal story in the book because my book is really part memoir of my youth and my life and growing up, but really it's also a perspective on systemic racism. But yeah, I did actually grow up in the suburbs of Montreal, and my stepfather was a white racist from Europe, and my brother Chris and I were affected by that in many different ways. I go into some pretty difficult stories in the book that detail that. And then subsequently, we all got pulled up and rerouted to Victoria, and where at the age of 14 and 15, my brother and I were actually abandoned by our parents in Victoria to fend for ourselves.
Tell me about your personal awakening.
Well, I think, again, going back to, obviously, I've been involved civically in politics in my community. I'm a community leader. So, I've been really interested in and had a perspective on the Black Lives Matter movement and all the things to do with systemic racism and inequality. And, but really, when I watched the video of George Floyd being murdered, it just brought all these emotions back for me in regards to my own lived experience. And then I realized I really got involved. People started calling me and asking me how I felt and what I thought. And a lot of, I know mostly white people, and they were asking me all kinds of questions. How should they feel? What should they do? And really, that's when I really started to look back at my history of my life and my experience with individual and systemic racism. And I thought the best way to perhaps educate and inform was to tell my own story, while also giving people information about what systemic racism really is, and that it exists.
And where do you think we are in Canada right now? You talk about, we are making some small steps, but then there's so many. It's just not anti-Black racism. It's Indigenous racism. It's Asian racism.
Of course.
So many in Canada.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm a bridge builder. I'm an optimist at heart. So I think we are making some steps forward. So to say that we haven't would be disingenuous. So I think we're making some steps, but I think we have a number of things to do. We need to raise awareness of the history of Canada, the fulsome history of discrimination that was real, and the fulsome history of this country. Then we need enough people to be aware of what's actually going on in terms of the systemic issues with racism and inequality. And then we need reform. We actually need to fix those systems, right? So I think we're taking little steps. Corporations are doing something. Governments are trying to take some steps. Individuals everyone has a responsibility to do what they can to become more aware, to awaken themselves, and
part
to
of
do
that
what they
could be, Stephen, we've run out of time, but a big part of that could be picking up the book and reading it. Black and White, an intimate multicultural perspective of white advantage and the past to change. Thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
All my favorite